all good story yesterday about talking about the future. Today, I'm taking you back to the past. And because to tell you my story, I need to take you back to last centuries, to GSM. And if you see here, Beethoven and GSM putting together in the same sentence, that is for a purpose, because both of them, they played a fundamental role in my personal development. And I hope I will be able to share this with you. So that is me when I was a child. Believe it or not, I was an happy child. And I'm smiling there. If you don't notice, I'm actually smiling. I come from a countryside, small countryside outside Milan. This is a beautiful area, plenty of green hills, local product, very popular for its wine. And this region is, as I said, not far from Milan. Is that little triangle there in Lombardia. Lombardia is the region north of Italy that became popular, unfortunately, all over the world in February 2020. Why it should be known for all its beauty, that are much more than that. So when I was a child and a kid, I don't have memory me saying what I want to be, really, until my mom bought a piano for me and my sister, so we started taking lessons. And at that time, I had a great teacher that was teaching me how to play piano, but also she put me into the mood of understanding music, getting in contact with great composers, and that was the time I was about 10, 11, when I said, okay, I want to become a pianist. My career didn't take off. The only performance that I was able to do, it was during Mass at church, but that was the time when I fell in love with Beethoven and classic music, but especially Beethoven. And Beethoven, since there, became part of my comfort zone until now. Still now, it is part of my comfort zone. I feel relaxed when I listen to it. It's often on the background when I work. And this is the only music that really brings me to tears. As I said, my career didn't take off, and especially when I started high school, I completely stopped. At that time, I was not bad in math, so I did math at university. You see here, Pavia University is a beautiful university, not far from Milan, historical one. It's a great university. So how come I put together university, math, and Beethoven? And that is the reason why, because there is a connection between mathematics and classic music, and there are a lot of studies to explain how come this kind of relationship. And the more frequently used example to show this relationship is the Moonlight Sonata from Beethoven. So what you see there is a pattern, and that pattern is representing, according to the studies, and I like it, they are representing the mathematical relationship between pitch frequency of the different notes, and it is form a kind of geometric series. And I was fascinated by Beethoven and by the fact that being deaf most of his life, or half of his life, he was still able to play great music. And according to studies, and again, I believe it, and I want to believe it, is that because he was able to visualize in his mind that pattern, and so he was able to combine all the different ways for the different note to create the harmony. So that is what I like it. But again, combining mathematics and classic music. Classic music is a pure art, mathematics is exact science, they can still be combined. But what Beethoven did, and also greatest pianist, greatest composer, he was able to enrich this combination, to bring his emotion and his creativity. And this is the bit I always like it, to be able to, let's say, have an algorithm to follow, but enrich it, to bring your own emotion, your own experience. And this is something that set in my DNA, I think, since that time, and something I would like always to achieve in my mind, in my personal journey. So after university, when a friend of mine told me that he got a job in Alcatel and that they were recruiting, I applied, and I got a job in Radio Mobile, in R&D Radio Mobile department. So I moved to Milan, that's Duomo Cathedral, and that was the time we were talking about 2G time. Don't count the years, please, but it was the time where all vendors, they were implementing the GSM recommendation to implement the network. So I was lucky to be able to study from the very beginning and at the vendor side, so to be able to learn all the different, I would say, mechanism around building a network, I went into protocol stack, protocol communication, different interface, all the different graphs, all the different technical specification. And I also had the opportunity to go on site to check and to test and to monitor. That was a great experience working with vendor. And even if all those could look like prehistoric term, prehistoric in the past, that experience really built my foundation, because I got my mindset in concept that they have been accompanying me all over my journey. But to be honest, the really challenging time at that time, and it was my first job, was not so much learning about radio mobile, but having to face an international environment where business language was English, and the foreign language that I studied was French. So I had a tough moment, also embarrassing moment, and I share with you the most one that I will never forget. I was talking on the phone to a guy, to an expert, a guru of that GSM 0808, for those who you remember. It was a kind of Bible at that time. So he was a guru around that. A British gentleman, pure British gentleman. I was talking on the phone, and the line was so bad I couldn't hear him. So I was in the middle of the open space and started shouting and say, Tony, Tony, I miss you. It was embarrassing when I realized that everybody was laughing. So that was my very first embarrassing moment. I have plenty after that. I came a long way, but I still do have embarrassing moments, and I learned to live with them, to cope with them. So that was experience on vendor. I was lucky to move to France and still working with vendor. And moving to France for me was going back to my French. So being able to speak French, not to have to switch to English when you are in the middle of a meeting and only one people is speaking English and all the other not, but you have to switch to English. So I was in my comfort habit. And still in Paris, my experience was around the technical specification, to adapt the standard to technical specification for vendor side. And that was the first time when I faced a prejudice for being Italian, and as an Italian, not reliable enough, always late, be able only to gesticulate. But I was lucky because I spent a lot of time working with French, and eventually they have changed their mind. After Paris, still on vendor side, I moved to Strasbourg, that is the Strasbourg Cathedral. And again, while in Paris the experience was all around technical specification, in Strasbourg it was around testing. It was a very first opportunity to have to work in a team, a mixed team, joint team between Italian and French, working together, not just to implement a DEC solution. Again, back several years ago, and we were able to code, write, testing, and troubleshooting. It was a great teamwork experience. That is completing my vendor experience. And thinking back to those years, what I feel like saying to people who are starting such an experience, I believe that if you want to start that experience, you need to take time to get started. Take time to learn, and learn from the bottom. If you learn from a vendor, you can learn from where the core knowledge is coming from. So to me, that was the best way to learn. And being humble enough, not being patient to climb too fast, but take time to build your foundation, so to be able to build your career. After a while, I moved to operator side. I moved back to Milan. And by the way, that's the Scala of Milan, the Opera House in Milan. So moving to operator side, I realized that I had to completely change my mind and my perspective. And I heard some other colleagues saying the same. Of course, you need to change your perspective. I need the time to adjust. And the really turning point in my personal development was when I joined H3G Italy. At that time, now we are back in these centuries, that time it was not even H3G because it was a green field in the sense that there was nothing, there was no network, so we had to build from scratch a network. And it was a great experience. And the most, let's say, learning experience was to be able to work, to have teamwork with a mixed team. And the more mixed the team, the better it is. This is when I learned that to have a teamwork experience, a mixed experience was great. What you see here, that was one of the several workshops that we had. In that case, it was to to design the multimedia messaging system. So we had a workshop with us as operator, with all Hutchinson, other Hutchinson company, and with vendor. So together we were really designing the system. That time was also the time when I faced for the first time a prejudice of being a woman and talking technical and not being knowledgeable enough when you talk technical and not reliable. I always remember the time when I was presenting the status of the multimedia messages. I was head of messages at the time. So I was presenting the status to a big audience. The CEO was there, COO was there. I was presenting, and then suddenly the CEO stopped me and said, "Manuela, are you kidding me? You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea. Stop presenting and move to the next presentation." I was shocked. I knew, of course, I knew what I was talking about, but I was confronting a top manager. My direct boss took side of the top manager, so I was not able to speak up for myself. For your information, at the end, the messaging system was implemented in the way I was trying to explain. The top manager left the company, was kindly invited to leave after a while. But what is my learning there? That I had to acknowledge that prejudice can happen. You cannot avoid that, but you have to be prepared to deal with it. And not to let people to disrespect you, and always to stand up for yourself. At the time, I was not able to do it, but I have known that you have to do it if you want to be recognized. So then I was in Milan, and after a while in the company has did a reorganization, and with this organization, my role was not necessary anymore. It didn't fit anymore in the new structure. So I was kindly offered a job in Rome to work as a customer service manager. And I said, I'm going to hate Rome. Okay, we know now that I was wrong, but I felt that is, of course, Colosseum, and that is one of the premises where I was working. And I was feeling so bad because I said, how are you there? I had to accept, of course. When you ask gently, you have to accept. I was thinking, how do you dare to offer me such a position? I'm trying to grow, and now you put me back. I was still a manager, but in the customer service, and I learned that was a prejudice of mine. I was totally wrong. I understood and learned that knowledgeable people can be everywhere. It doesn't matter the role, it doesn't matter profile in the company. And that experience gave me the opportunity also to complement my management skill, because I had the opportunity to manage a huge number of resources, like over 70 people with different profiles, different attitudes. So it was a big learning, and I understood that I was prejudging. So again, thinking about that time, what I feel like saying, that compromise, you have to face compromise, as we all do in our regular life. Compromise can happen. You have to accept it and take the most of that. And do not prejudge, because you can learn on your way. Don't be so narrow-minded. You can learn always. So, but then I was in Rome. And then, now we are back to this year, to this time where, and this is where all those here are made what I am now. So how come I get into roaming? By chance. I was in the call center, and the CTO, who knew me from my previous experience, told me that there was a guy working in core network, that was leaving the company. Do you want to replace him? He said, yes, of course. So I moved to core network. I felt like I was back home, and I learned that this guy was working interconnect and roaming. I knew very little about interconnect and roaming, so I had to learn, and quickly to fall in love with roaming. So we are talking about 2009, and the love story continues. But the time when I really took off my personal development is when I moved to IOD. IOD, by definition, as innovation is in DNA. So I was able to broaden my horizon, to have a wider view, to open my mind, and to apply that little, let's say, creativity, emotion that I was talking about, to implement a new concept. The company was supporting me, so we were able to implement and bring live a new concept. And that is thanks to IOD, to this it could be creativity and innovation as it is in IOD DNA. Being part of IOD means that I had the opportunity to work in that is Trafalgar Square in the London office, back to Milan, in Milan office. You see there another, I didn't want to put always the same picture. So that is, for those who know, the famous vertical forest in Milan, and that's the Milan office. And of course, I cannot forget that office space is also my home, doing a lot of smart working. So if I want to summarize my key learning that now became my mantra in all my journey, to summarize those are my mantra now. And first of all, be humble. But be careful, because being humble doesn't mean to be naive. There is a difference, and you need being humble as something, but be humble enough. And what is important also, don't give up motivation. I mean, motivation doesn't have an expiry date, that it goes with your age. You need to keep motivation up, because I believe that is the petrol to drive your career. Also, learn to deal with prejudgment, and also learn that trust doesn't come granted. You need to work, to do some homework to build your own trust on you. And last but not least, you need to find inspiration on the way. It doesn't matter the obstacle, there is always room to be inspired and to grow. So those are my mantras. And I think I became a better person having in mind those mantras. But the last bit that is probably more difficult to achieve is this other mantra. Try not to sacrifice your private life. Don't give up your passion. And when you are lost in the middle of responsibility, challenges, priorities, where you are under stress, drowning in a mix of emotion and stress, working related, reposition value and put value on the right perspective if you want to get lost. That's it.